Hi everyone. I don't know if you're a fan of the show This Is Us. It touches on a lot of important topics, obviously produced for the masses. They can't get everything perfect as far as these storylines. I think it's good drama, good entertainment, and I think it's pretty well thought out. You know, these are heavy topics: adoption, foster care, birth families, adopted families, all these things. Like, there's no one way to go about it. There's so many different takes on it. So, you know, love it or hate it, the show This Is Us, from an adoptee perspective, like, I really appreciate that this is a very mainstream show, and they are bringing to light some of the complexities surrounding adoption, and it's messy and complicated, and I think the show does a decent job at like showing some of that. But you know, they're still not going to please everybody. Last night was their 2-hour season premiere, and I want to do a little bit of a reaction video and just a little bit of a discussion about some of the scenes that were in there and how it relates to adoption and the adoptee experience. It really touches home for someone like me. Right off the bat, they have like the recap clips or whatever, and you know, it recaps the scene where Kevin and Randall are outside, and Kevin says, like, you know, I used to think like the worst thing that happened to me was like when the day Dad died, but now I know like the worst day of my life was the day they brought you home. This is so triggering. Like, I think as an adoptee who grew up in a very complicated household, I have 3 adopted siblings, I have white adoptive parents. I have one sibling who has, you know, definitely said that, like, you know, you're not my real sister, or like, you know, to my parents, like, you're not my mom, you're not my dad. It was almost always said out of anger, like in the heat of the moment. I mean, that's really like hurtful, and that's probably one of the worst things like an adoptee can be told. And like, so that's from in my case, it was my brother, who was also a Korean adoptee, like, you know, saying it to me. So like, we're both kind of in the same boat. We're both adopted, but we're not biological to each other. And with Randall's case, like, I think that's probably more hurtful, like, because, you know, it was from Kevin, who is their parents' biological child, saying it to the one kind of outcast adoptee, you know, who didn't look like them, was the only adopted child in the family. And you're adopted. Like, generally speaking, your adopted family is your family. So if you are shown rejection in any way from that family, if you don't feel like you belong in your family, which is like sadly the case with most people, like, and there's a quote by Maya Angelou, and I had first heard about it from Brené Brown's book, I think it was Braving the Wilderness. You only are free when you realize you belong no place, you belong every place, and no place at all. The price is high, the reward is great. And it really resonates, you know, with an adoptee. Yeah, I don't know, I can't even get into that, like, that's gonna make the video way too long. Anyway, Randall being rejected by Kevin like that's heavy stuff. And Randall, you know, their birthday's coming up, he's talking to Beth, I'll never really know what happened that day, is it even my real birthday? And I think this is something that rings true for a lot of adoptees, like myself included. You know, 364 days out of the year, it doesn't really cross my mind. I don't really think about it, but every year on my birthday, I do wonder, like, is this my real birthday? Like, it's like, birthdays haven't really been a big deal for myself or my family, and I wonder if that's actually like an unspoken way about it. Like, maybe we've all kind of felt like, well, what does this really mean? Like, all of us came from uncertain beginnings and questionable record keeping and documents from our adoptions. Yeah, the birthday and like its significance is not really the same for an adoptee, I find, or for me anyway. Obviously I can't speak for everybody, but I think when my own children were born, like, that was like, I could never forget that. And I've even met my birth family, and I remember asking, was one of my questions, what is my real birthday, or like date of birth? And my birth mother didn't actually have an answer. Like, she didn't know. Even though I've met my birth family, I still don't know that part of it. Like, I still don't know what happened that day. I still don't know if I went home with them, if she held me, if she didn't, like how much time was, you know, I just don't know any of that. So it's like, yeah, I will never know what happened that day. So, you know, like, Randall's like discussing that, or like thinking about that, like, really, like, you know, really resonates with me. Like, I do, that is a part of my past that I will never know. I have some notes here. So, Kate and Toby are looking to adopt. So she obviously had a hard pregnancy and hard time conceiving or whatever with their first child. Now they're talking about adoption, and you know, they're starting the process for that. What I think this really brings to light was the perceived differences in the adoptee experience within their family. Kate and Randall's interaction displayed this a little bit. Kate really didn't seem to have a firm grasp on what it had meant for Randall to be an adoptee in that family, to look different, to be different, just not really belong in the same way. And I think so it'll be really interesting if they do end up adopting. Obviously, like, the racial difference adds something to the process. You know, if they adopt a Caucasian child, its own complexities, I'm sure, but it's just not quite the same. It's not as like written all over your face when you walk out the door as a family. So it just doesn't draw the same kind of questions and attention, that same interaction. So Randall and Kate, 40 years, we've never talked about race. Like, race was never discussed in the household. We grew up in the same house. Randall was just saying how the experience was like so different, and how, you know, Kate, she was texting and like, oh, which Black organization charity should we donate to next, and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I think she means well. Just like for a lot of people, she's like really late to the party, like trying to play catch up for, you know, years and decades of what Randall has known all along and been processing and dealing with. And like, I can relate to this too. Like, yeah, in my household, like, race was not really discussed. And obviously, like, we all knew we were adopted, like we didn't look like our parents. But so the born out of tragedy discussion at the end, oof, yeah, Beth, you know, talking to Randall, saying, you know, you were born out of tragedy, and look at, you know, who you are, who you've become, what you've made, you know, like they're surrounded by their daughters and their beautiful home and all this. She's just, you know, praising him for turning it around, basically. You know, you came from tragic beginnings, which is always the assumption. I think that made it all the more powerful to get the glimpse into Randall's biological parents' lives, you know, when they found out they had conceived, when they had plans for that baby. They wanted to get the bigger apartment with the nice window and the good light and whatever. You know, they obviously planned on keeping that baby and being a family. Everything about those scenes that were involving like the birth mother and like the birth father, like, you know, when they have this newborn baby is crying, they made it seem like as if she had overdosed. Maybe that's just how I read that. But, and then, you know, when the paramedics get there and they ask him, like, sir, are you high? Like, the perceived drug use by the mom. And I mean, it just plays into the all too common stereotype of the working class minority group. It's really heartbreaking, you know, when she's in so much pain, and like he's like trying to get her to go to the clinic and she doesn't want to go, you know, to avoid that judgment or that potential for being judged. What if she had just gotten the help she needed? In theory, like from what we can see, it looks like it would have changed everything. And so for Randall, like they're kind of foreshadowing this big development, you know, that would have the potential to change like any adoptee's life. For a child that was like given up, knowing that you were conceived from love and your birth was celebrated and wanted, and your parents had plans for you, they had your room picked out, or they wanted this life for you. That changes a lot. Like, so for Randall, like, you know, he's a grown man, he has his own family, he's already met and whatever with his birth father, and so his story is probably as complete as he thinks it's going to be, as far as like looking at knowing anything about his past. It's clear like the birth father like believed he was doing what was right. Like he knew he couldn't do it on his own. Oh yeah, anyway, so the birth mother, no spoilers, like I don't want to spoil it, but like, you know, that changes a lot probably for Randall's story. So, so this is a side note, this is not adoption related, this is how it hit home for me. And something else I appreciate about the show is, you know, Rebecca has mild cognitive impairment, heading down the Alzheimer's path. And I don't think I've shared this at all, but like my mom has early onset Alzheimer's and has had it for a while, and it's just very true. Like the way that they are portraying her progression, Rebecca's progression with the disease, is really heartbreaking. And you know, from what I can tell from my family and like going through that ourselves, like that certainly hits home for me. So anyway, my battery's gonna die, and yeah, I just wanted to, I did enjoy the episode overall. I think it was pretty good. It's always like a hot mess, but it's emotional and it's not my story, which I love about that, and it's entertaining. It's stuff I can definitely relate to. I think it's great that it's on mainstream media. So yeah, overall I think This Is Us is a decent show. I hope you enjoyed this impromptu discussion about the season premiere. I guess let me know in the comments if you like the show, or what you thought about, you know, what you think about their take on adoption. And I realized that there's just no right or wrong way to do it. I think like people are literally offended by like my personal adoption story and like my whatever. So you're just not gonna please everybody, and that's fine. And so true for a mainstream media show like this. There's no way they can please everybody, especially with people who like adoptees and people who are so up in the mix, like so deep into adoption topics. But yeah, it'd be exciting to see where they take the show and how they kind of develop the storylines. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.